at the forefront of politics.
Our enemy is Trump. He is the enemy. We gotta unite. If we're not a united party, we lose to Trump.
On the front lines of activism.
There's certain fights, if we don't engage, they win. This is a fundamental question of who we are.
And delivering your daily dose of comedy.
Donald Trump, when he had his physical, they had his blood pressure, and mine is higher than his. Oh. And the irony is mine is higher because of him.
From the blue wave.
We flipped. Enough seats to take control of the House. We control the House.
To 2020 and beyond. This is the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress, Channel 127.
And welcome to the show, brothers and sisters. Thursday, September 5th. I'm Dean Obeidallah. As always here, wanting to be your Muslim BFF because I'm needy. We know that. And, you know, I don't know. I live in New York City. I'm not sure what the weather's going to be tomorrow. I'm waiting for Trump to do a Sharpie sketch of what the weather's going to look like tomorrow because we don't know. Sharpie Gate, folks. We talked about it last night. It broke right before the show. It's exploded into a 2-day story. And I got to play the late night comics. We'll just play Colbert. And it's also funny. Colbert and Trevor Noah had the exact same joke, which is rare, but it happens in late night world. Neither one stole it from the other, I can assure you. But some funny stuff going on there. And I can just tell you, as of an hour ago, Donald Trump, literally an hour ago, was still tweeting, defending himself, saying the hurricane was going to hit Alabama. Fake news is making it all up. The leader of the Republican Party, folks, the guy's the president. There's a deadly storm barreling in on Carolinas. And those are red states. Like, if it was blue states, I'd be like, I know he doesn't care. They're red states. And still, he is more focused on him and in trying to say he didn't make a mistake than the well-being of our fellow Americans. Let's have Colbert. Let's have a little fun first, then we'll get to the seriousness and talk about climate change as well, which is all interrelated. Here's clip number 1, Colbert. And listen to Trump, by the way. I usually don't say this. In the 2 clips embedded in these comedy clips of Trump speaking, you can hear now a cognitive deterioration. And I don't know, maybe he's simply not sleeping, but he's not the same person. I'm not sure what's up. So here's clip number 1.
Trump wasn't interested in where the storm is going to go. He wanted to talk more about where the storm was going to go.
That was the original chart, and you see it was going to hit not only Florida but Georgia. It could have was going toward the Gulf. That was what was originally projected.
Why? Why, you ask? Did Trump show a map with an outdated projection of Dorian's path instead of one showing where the storm actually went? I'm glad I pretended you asked. Remember last 2 days how we got into a disagreement with the National Weather Service where he tweeted the storm was going to hit Alabama and they said, what? No. Well, take a closer look at Trump's outdated map from last Thursday morning. He used a Sharpie to extend the path into Alabama. He gave the storm a boob job. I tell you, a couple of hard ones.
Okay with that.
Before I did that, it was a Category 5. Now she's a Category 10.
And the best point there was the map. And I didn't know this last night. The map that Donald Trump called reporters in to show them, the one he put the Sharpie on, extending it into Alabama, was not a recent map. It was literally from a week ago. He got a map from a week ago, which he thought would support his claim. It did not, so he used a Sharpie to extend it into Alabama. And then he was asked about, did you draw that on the, literally asked about, do you know anything about the Sharpie? And listen to his idiotic, moronic, delusional response. Here's clip number 2.
At an event right after Trump's map presentation there in the Oval Office, a reporter asked him if he had altered the map. And Trump cranked his mouth settings to ramble.
It appeared to have been edited or something to include Alabama. Can you explain how that change was made?
No, I just know, I know that Alabama was in the original forecast. They thought it would get it as a piece of it. It was supposed to go, actually, we have a better map than that, which is going to be presented, where we had many lines going directly, many models, each line being a model, and they were going directly through. And in all cases, Alabama was hit.
I had an even better map than that one, where the line follows the hurricane's path through a maze. And it leads to a treasure chest full of delicious popcorn shrimp from Long John Silver's. Thank you for your service, Captain Silvers. He will be missed.
And this morning, Donald Trump, while a hurricane was ravaging the Carolinas, took to Twitter to tweet, I'm not even kidding, folks. He tweets, Alabama was going to be hit or graze, and then Hurricane Dorian took a different path up the East Coast. The fake knows this very well. That's why they're the fake news. And literally an hour ago, again, posting a map from a week ago. Look, there is something fundamentally wrong with Trump. We know that. You don't have to be a psychologist. There's something wrong. But this is dangerous now. This is narcissism at levels at the peril of fellow Americans who are suffering, who are being ravaged by a horrific hurricane that has killed at least over 20 people in the Bahamas, and now it's making its way through the Carolinas. And instead of being focused on them, being focused on how to help them, how to make sure they know what's going on, he is more focused on trying to defend himself from the allegation that he made a mistake than on our fellow Americans. He even went on further at 9:30 this morning, an hour later, slamming the actress Deborah Messing again on Twitter. Why? Because she suggested yesterday in a tweet that there's a fundraiser for Trump happening in the Hollywood area. And she said that she hopes that everyone who buys a ticket, their names are revealed to the public so we can know who they are. And he got all angry at that because the bizarre thing about Trump supporters and Trump, they're upset if people know who are giving money to Trump, apparently. I mean, they have to hide it, and Trump's happy with them hiding it. By the way, it's all public information anyway. If you're giving a campaign contribution, but in any event, forget that. It doesn't matter. It's messing. It doesn't matter if he made a mistake or not. He should have forgotten about it. He should have moved on to focusing on the well-being of our fellow Americans. Any normal human being, any competent, rational person would do that. And we're not dealing with that person, which hence, again, why September 9th, the House Democrats must begin an impeachment inquiry. There are so many reasons this man should not be in office. Even Republicans must see it at this point. And I think it was actually perfect that last night on CNN, they had their climate change town hall. And it was not a debate. It was 10 candidates over a bunch of hours. I'll play a few clips of it. And why it was so important is that you have Hurricane Dorian, at one point was the most powerful hurricane in the Atlantic almost ever. And because the intensity of these hurricanes has been greatly exacerbated and made worse because of climate change, because the water is getting warmer, because there's more carbon in the air. And the warmer water makes these hurricanes more dangerous. And so before the climate change debate, there's Donald Trump, the Trump administration, doing more to hurt our environment. And this is all very simply why. Donald Trump rolls back environmental regulations and regulations that would help address climate change because one simple reason. He wants to make sure his GOP donors, the wealthy people who are executives and own these corporations, will get as much revenue as possible to in turn give that revenue, some percentage of it, some piece of it, to him and the other Republicans running for 2020. I mean, it's extremely simple. But this is not new. Republicans have long rolled back environmental regulations to have businesses make more money because in turn that money goes to them through contributions. Except we're in a climate change emergency. So what happened yesterday? And while this isn't the biggest thing, it is important. It's still the approach to addressing climate change is going to be, there's no silver bullet. It's going to be various ways of approaching it through policies. The impact in a negative way by Trump, his rollbacks are piece by piece by piece. But ultimately, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You put it together and you have a climate emergency getting worse. So what did they announce yesterday? Plans to significantly weaken federal rules that would have required Americans to use more energy-efficient light bulbs. These light bulbs would reduce greenhouse gas emissions that cause global warming. We've done many specials on it. I know it seems at times way out there, climate change and daunting, but if you focus on some of the smaller things, I think that's how you can get a sense that you can make a difference on these issues. And these light bulbs are one specific way of doing it. I mean, this regulation was actually enacted in 2007 by the Bush administration. It was not an Obama regulation. It was a Bush administration regulation that was going to start in next year. That's how much time they gave for the companies that make light bulbs to deal with this and get ready. It was going to eliminate inefficient bulbs nationwide. And the result would have been at the same, and this is remarkable here, It gets rid of, I'll give you this number in case you're a scientist. It gets rid of 38 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions in a year. What does that mean in real world terms, the light bulbs this way? It's equal to the emissions of about 7 million cars. So you're going to reduce the emissions equivalent of 7 million cars by all of us starting to use light bulbs. And I bet you most of us are already using the most efficient light bulbs we can because it saves you money in the long run. And in fact, this would save money because it would save about $14 billion less a year on lighting, electricity, collectively for our nation. On average, each household would save $100 a year on their electric bills by using the light bulbs that, it's not you were mandated to use a certain light bulb, they were phasing out some of the ridiculous light bulbs. But still, nope. Trump said no, and this is one small part. Trump has done so much. This administration has done so many horrible things. One of the most lasting will be climate change. They've weakened a broad array of rules designed to fight climate change. They announced just last week to cut back on regulations on the emissions of methane, and methane is a powerful greenhouse gas. It's like really, people talk about methane gas all the time. That heats up the environment. It makes the air warmer. We'll go through in a second what that's doing before I play the clips of the 2020 Democrats. He also wanted to freeze anti-pollution and fuel efficiency standards for cars. Again, adding more emissions, more carbon to the air just warms it up. And the list goes on and on. In fact, Donald Trump himself has called climate change a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese. Why? Why would you say that? I don't know. But the reality is we're getting to a climate change emergency. And that's not my words. I'm not an expert. I'm not a scientist. We covered this a lot last year when the UN report came out. We had Mustafa Santiago Ali on for a special not too long ago on this very issue. As of last year, we had 12 years to save the planet. We're down to 11 years to reduce emissions going into the air and prevent the warming of our planet. And if we don't, what's going to happen? Real life stuff here. Longer, hotter heat waves. More frequent crop-killing droughts. Meltdown of the polar ice sheets, which will result in more flooding. In fact, we will have more flooding. It will also be more intense hurricanes. More of these 500-year rains that happened 2 years in a row, like in Houston. More and more of that. So perfect backdrop. Last night, CNN, we'll play some of these clips here. And it was a marathon of events. It was happening during my show, so I had to go home and watch a lot of it. And I watched a lot of clips online. And first, though, I want to play one clip. I thought this was so interesting. And it was something I had heard about, but I like it that it was explained by Anderson Cooper last night. He's sitting there with Joe Biden about how the big fossil fuel companies knew their emissions were hurting our environment. They knew it was warming up the air, but they lied about it. They lied to us about it. It's been documented. And here's, I think, such an important point. Here's clip number 3, please.
I think a lot of people don't know about the studies that you cited. 2017, there was a Harvard study that examined both public and private communications from ExxonMobil. The study showed that for 40 years, while the company publicly were raising doubts about climate change, the dangers of it, internally, ExxonMobil scientists and executives were acknowledging the threat to the planet. There was 2018, there was a Dutch news organization which uncovered internal communications from Royal Dutch Shell showing they understood the impacts of climate change and the company's contribution to it all the way back to the 80s. Let me just point out that in response to Harvard, Exxon said, our statements have been consistent with our understanding of climate science. Shell said, quote, its position on climate change has been a matter of public record for decades. We strongly support the Paris Agreement on climate change. But Isaac's question is, will you hold fossil fuel corporations and executives who've lied to the public accountable?
Yes, and by the way, just like we did the tobacco industry that lied to the public, just like we did the opioids.
All right, so you had 10 candidates. I'm not going to go through all of their various proposals on climate change. The good thing is there's a great swath of great ideas where they do all agree. They all agree to recommit to the Paris Climate Accord. They all agree, all 10, to end subsidies to oil, gas, and coal companies. All agree to halt fossil fuel leasing on public lands. There's debates on fracking and other things. So I want to play a few of the leading candidates' responses here. Here's Joe Biden, very practical approach to climate change. And even his climate change proposal is ambitious, but modest compared to the others. And here is a simple thing he's talking about to make a change. Here's clip number 4, please.
We can take millions of vehicles off the road if we had high-speed rail. I've been a champion of that for the last 25 years. We know the corridors where we could do that. It would literally take millions of vehicles off the road. But you have to have a rail system that makes people say, if I get on that rail, I will get there as fast as I would have gotten had I driven. and I can afford to do it relative to the cost of my driving. There's a direct correlation. This is something I spent the bulk of my career on, trying to save Amtrak and a few other little things like transportation. But my point is that there are things that we can do now that can begin to change the arc in a significant way. And as we, in fact, invest in the science and the technology and the changes that are available and will come to fruition, in fact, we can make it significantly better.
And I like that, talking about high-speed rail. And the reason I like it is that it's tangible. We all get it, because some of the plans to reduce carbon from the air, it's so abstract. You're like, well, carbon, I don't see it. Talk about the idea of saying high-speed rail, and if it's really effective and on time and get you there fast, and it's, you know you're going to get there. Less people on how Trump views it as a pipe dream, and her reaction to that. Here's clip number 5, please.
He says the Green New Deal is a dream because we're 60% right now on fossil fuels. You're saying you want to put into research and get it done, but you don't know how right now. No. So you want to bet our economy on an ambition. What's the answer?
He says the Green New Deal is a dream.
I'm assuming he says it. I don't know what he'd say. It may not be that
I'm
nice.
just saying where he is right now is a nightmare. And that's where we really do have to start this conversation. Don't sit around and tell me what's not possible. Sit around and look what happens if we don't make change. We've got, 11 years, maybe, to reach a point where we've cut our emissions in half. And that's not just America. We're only 20% of the problem. Now, that's a big hunk of the problem. But there's another world out there that's 80% of this problem. So you bet that this is a moment where we better dream big and fight hard, because that's how it is that we're going to make the changes we need to make. Now, part of it is going to be about research and development, you bet. Part of it, we already know how to do. We know how to do offshore wind. We know how to do solar. The question is, are we willing to put the resources into it? And my answer is, yeah, we better be willing to put the resources into it, because the alternative is unthinkable. Life on Earth is at risk.
So Liz Warren, very animated. She did a great job from what I saw. Then here's Bernie Sanders, and he has a very global approach to dealing with this climate change problem, which is, as Liz Warren just said, we only are responsible for 20% of the carbon emissions in the world. So to address it, there's no cone over the United States. We need a global approach. That's what the Paris Climate Accord was about. It recognized that we must have a global approach to this problem. It goes way beyond the boundaries of our nation. And here's Bernie Sanders on that very point. Here's clip number 6.
Everybody in this room knows. I mean, this is a difficult issue. Nobody has a magical solution. I don't. But this is not just an American issue. This is an issue that impacts the entire world. So what I would do, unlike President Trump, who has turned his back on this issue, in fact, made it significantly worse by expanding the use of fossil fuel, what I will do, and I'm not here to tell you that I think it will happen like this, but I think it's worth the try, that in this extraordinary moment of global crisis, I think we need a president, hopefully Bernie Sanders, that reaches out to the world, to Russia and China and India, Pakistan, all the countries over the world, and say, guess what? Whether you like it or not, we are all in this together. And if you are concerned about the children in your country and future generations, we're going to have to work together. And maybe, just maybe, instead of spending $1.5 trillion every single year on weapons of destruction designed to kill each other, maybe we pool those resources and we work together against our common enemy, which is climate change.
So there's Bernie Sanders. That's really the thrust of his approach to the whole thing. And he's got a very ambitious climate change plan, just like Liz Warren. And I'll play one more clip here. Senator Kamala Harris raising a unique point that others didn't about environmental racism. And Mustafa Santiago Ali was on the show. We've discussed this many times. That is the brown and black people. It's the poor communities that suffer the most of climate change and the impact of it, because they're powerless in terms of government. And that's because of Trump. I mean, what Trump is doing is typical Republican stuff. Cater to the wealthy, cater to the upper class, and the rest of us suffer. So here's Kamala Harris, clip 7, please.
I think about this in the context of many things, but ultimately it's about empowering communities that are often ignored, just to be candid. And that is a big part of the emphasis on in my plan, is addressing that. And it is about our disability community. It is about our indigenous people. It is about Black and brown communities. It is about communities that have experienced poverty. And all of those communities have been disproportionately impacted by the change that we are seeing in our climate, not to mention the kind of behaviors by the fossil fuel industry that have been about pollution, about dumping and all of that. Let me take you back to 2004, when I was district attorney of San Francisco, and I created the first environmental justice unit of my office. And one of the reasons is that there is a community in San Francisco called Bayview Hunters Point, where the annual, at the time, household income was $15,000. And there were companies that were just dumping full-time into the water around that community with serious health consequences. And so I took it on. And that was one of the reasons I created my environmental justice unit, to take it on, saying that no community should be dumped on. No community should be less than.
And she goes on from there, and you get the idea. It's very clear. It's like Flint, Michigan, with the water. Poor communities suffer. Newark, New Jersey now, there's more lead in the water and the pipes, and they're trying to address it. And the last thing, though, that came out of this that got some of the news was that Joe Biden, who's made a pledge not to take money from fossil fuel companies, was confronted there by the fact that he was at the event last night, but tonight he's having a fundraiser in New York, right here in New York City, that is organized by someone with at least ties to the fossil fuel industry, if not actually an officer in a fossil fuel company. And here is that exchange. Here's clip number 8.
I know that you signed the No Fossil Fuel Money Pledge, but I have to ask, how can we trust you to hold these corporations and executives accountable for their crimes against humanity when we know that tomorrow you are holding a high-dollar fundraiser hosted by Andrew Goldman, a fossil fuel executive?
He's not a fossil fuel executive, I'm telling you. He is not a fossil fuel executive.
There is a fundraiser tomorrow night. It's given by a guy named Andrew Goldman. He does hedge funds and stuff, but he also has a company called Western LNG. And their biggest project, which I think was announced in like 2018, is a floating liquefied facility for natural gas. It's off the coast of British Columbia, and it's going to provide Canadian gas to parts of northern Asia. So what Andrew is saying is, if you're going to a fundraiser that's given in part by this guy who has a company that is pulling up natural gas, are you the right guy to go after these?
Well, I didn't realize he does that. I was told, if you look at the SEC filings, he's not listed as one of those executives. That's what we look at, the SEC filings. Who are those executives? I've kept that pledge, period.
So are you going to look at that fundraiser tomorrow night?
I'm going to look at what you just told me and find out if that's accurate, yes.
So there's no indication that he not attend, that he's going to attend tonight. We could find out, that could change. But Simone Sanders, who works on the Biden campaign right now, says Vice President Biden signed a pledge not to take money from fossil fuel companies, stands by that. But the founder, some of the people involved in environmental groups like Sunrise said, if Biden is serious about taking on the power of fossil fuel lobby, why is he going to a fundraiser hosted by the co-founder of a natural gas company? And by the way, Andrew Goldman and Biden have deep ties. They know each other for years and years. Goldman served as an advisor to Biden while he was in the Senate. That's how long ago. I mean, we're talking about before 2008. So here's what I want to put out there for people. And I really want to, there's no right or wrong answer. And don't feel like no one's going to judge you, my fellow progressives. I want to know to people, where does climate change fall in your priorities of the candidates in 2020? Like healthcare, we talk about a lot. It touches us very closely. For others, there are issues about criminal justice reform. For others, it's college debt. And the list goes on. But where does climate change fall? And we're all concerned about it. I doubt anyone's listening who is not concerned about climate change. But where in the hierarchy of issues does it stand? And is it something you want to hear the 2020 candidates talk about even more? Or is it so overwhelming, so daunting, that on some level you hear about it, you like to hear their plans, but you're not holding people accountable because you know ultimately Congress is going to have to pass it. I mean, the plans range from 1.5 or 7 trillion to $16 trillion with Bernie Sanders' plan. And so I'm sincerely so curious for my fellow progressives about this issue. Where does it stand? Also, when you hear Joe Biden is going to go to a fundraiser, that the guy's at least related to the fossil fuel industry. Is that troubling to you, or does it not matter? Is that just politics and he should just raise as much money as possible and then we're going to hold him to his word when he's elected? Or are you saying right now, hey, I don't want that either? But the big picture is on climate change. Where does it fall for you in importance? How important is it to you? How much of a true emergency do you view it as? Or is it overwhelming and something that you put on the list, but you're like, look, healthcare is far more important, or these other issues are much, much more important to me? I'd love to hear from you, 866-997-4748. You're my guest right at the top of the hour. Give me a call. Be right back after this.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
Voting is the most important civil right of our era.